Back in 2013, I was a deputy manager at a hardware store here in Delaware. For my morning shifts, I'd open the place up, get the computer and registers up and running, then I'd head into the office to check our answering machine. This was probably one of the more crucial aspects of my morning routine because that was my way of finding out if any deliveries had canceled, if anything was arriving earlier than expected, and also if anyone had called in sick that morning. So I sit down with my coffee and I listen to maybe 2 or 3 fairly routine messages. Then, when I hit play on the next one, I recognize the voice right away. I've been half expecting to hear Greg's voice on one of the messages because he was supposed to be there that morning to help me open up. Hearing his voice was kind of a relief at first because at least I knew that he was okay and just sick. But that's not what he'd called to tell us. Greg was an older guy, close to retirement age, and he was quite possibly the sweetest man I'd ever had the pleasure of working with. So naturally, when I didn't see him that morning, I was concerned. I figured he was going to say how he wasn't feeling too good, how he was going to take the day off, and as much as it was going to suck trying to find coverage for him, I was just glad to know that he was okay. But what he had to tell us was anything but reassuring. The message started with, "Good morning, ladies," which made me smile right away because it was how he greeted us every morning. But then he went on to say, "I'm real sorry, but I don't think I'll be making it into work tomorrow morning. I'm going to see Sherry." I didn't know who this Sherry person was, but I also wasn't super close with Greg, not like he was with the ladies who worked on the store's floor or registers, and so I went to ask them. I asked my coworker, a woman named Janine, who Sherry was in relation to Greg, and then the way that she looked at me told me almost everything I needed to know. Sherry was Greg's wife. At least she had been until she passed away. I guess that doesn't make her not his wife, but you see what I mean. And so when he said he was going to see Sherry, I figured that he meant that he was going to visit her grave or something. But then when I said that and expressed why I wasn't sure that warranted a sick day, Janine totally agreed. She says it wasn't like Greg to ever call in sick, and he only ever visited Sherry's grave on their anniversary, their birthday, and usually once around the holidays. I then asked Janine, "Well, what does it mean when he says he's going to see Sherry?" And after she turned a whiter shade of pale, she simply responded with, "I think you better go make some phone calls." To which I did. I called Greg on his cell, maybe 2 or 3 times, hoping maybe he just wasn't hearing the phone, and I tried his home phone number, but again, my calls went unanswered. I put the phone down, and then I swear to God, not even 2 seconds goes by before it rings. I'm hoping it's Greg, but it's not. It's Greg's son. Then when I asked if his dad was okay, he told me no, Greg was not okay. In fact, he passed away during the night. Greg's son said that this is what he figured from having seen the scene. It appeared his dad had gotten a bunch of paperwork done, including his will, before laying down in an easy chair and just slipping away during the night. He'd watered his houseplants, paid his bills, put on his best suit and shined his shoes, and then after leaving messages for us and one for his choir director letting him know that he wouldn't need a ride to practice, Greg laid down in his recliner and just died. There was nothing to suggest that he'd expedited his exit, so to speak. There were no pills, no blood, no clear plastic bags or anything of that nature. Everything looked entirely painless and entirely natural. But then somehow I find that all the more haunting. The thing that scares me is sort of how he knew it was his time. Do we all know when we're close to death? And do we all feel so goddamn cheery about it, or was Greg just not afraid to go? The whole thing with Greg isn't the scariest thing that's ever happened to me. I've been in a 14-car pileup where a family of 4 died, and let me tell you, that was way more terrifying than finding out Greg had passed away peacefully. But that accident doesn't stick with me the way Greg's sudden passing does, and I guess that's because all of those unanswered questions regarding one of the few things we all share. Man, woman, or child, east or west, north or south, our unstoppable and inevitable end. On Valentine's Day of 1992, I was a 23-year-old wannabe musician living just outside of Redding, California. I had a part-time job at an auto shop 3 days a week, one that I had to get up at 7 a.m. for, and that year, Valentine's just so happened to fall on a Friday, which meant that I had to work from 8 until 3. But I'd also promised my then-girlfriend that I'd treat her to some special Valentine's Day dinner, complete with gifts and trip to the movies. Meaning that I had around 1.5 hours to get home, freshen up, pick up all my girlfriend's gifts, and then pick her up at work on time. I wasn't looking forward to doing all that rushing around. I was kicking myself for not being more prepared, and I remember driving to work hoping that I might be able to clock out early or something. But then, when I show up at work, all the shutters are down and my boss's truck is nowhere to be seen. I figured that he was probably running a little late, which was way out of character for him, but I didn't immediately assume anything was wrong or anything like that. I just stayed put in my car, leaned back in the seat, and tried to catch a little extra shut-eye until I heard his truck roll into the lot. Next thing I know, I'm catching myself falling asleep, and when I open my eyes, it's almost 8:30 a.m. I've been sitting in that parking lot for almost 35 minutes, and my boss, who practically lived at the auto shop, just hadn't shown up for some reason. I had his home phone number written down somewhere, but this was in a journal back at my apartment, so instead of just sitting there like an idiot, I drove back to my apartment and gave him a call on my home phone. There was no answer at his place, so I left a message on his machine, then basically kind of just sat there, not knowing what to do. On the one hand, if my boss was sick or was off doing something and hadn't planned to open the shop that day, then it was no big deal at all. In fact, it was a blessing, because I had time to go buy my girlfriend her gifts and whatnot. But then no one called me, and I felt like I'd have known if we were going to be closed that day because I wouldn't have been all stressed out about the time. So instead of doing just nothing, I decided to give one of my coworkers a call, just to make sure that we weren't opening like an hour later that morning or whatever. But then he says the same thing. He hadn't gotten any calls, and as far as he knew, we were opening up at the regular time that morning. I then tell him about showing up to a shut shop and our boss not showing up even though I waited a while. I remember how there was a bit of a pause on the line as my coworker thought it over for a few seconds, and then he asked me, "Are you free to do something right now?" I obviously didn't have anything else planned, but then I also wanted to know what he was about to ask me, so I told him something like, maybe. It depends on what that something is. It turns out all he wanted to do was head over to our boss's house to see if he was okay. And since I figured that it'd take minimal time at best and was definitely the mature call, I agreed to head over there with him. About 10 to 15 minutes later, he pulls up outside my parents' place, honks his horn, and I run out and jump in his passenger seat. My coworker seems kind of tense, but other than that, we're still just two dudes on their way over to check on our boss. 'Cause like I said, not just showing up for work like that was way out of character for our boss. And the drive over to his place takes maybe 20 minutes, long enough for my coworker to get pretty worried, I think. I was still kind of looking on the bright side at the time, thinking maybe we might get the day off or something, and I suggested to my coworker that on the way over. He shot the idea right out of the sky, though, saying that the auto shop was our boss's life, how he only ever took Sundays off, and how if he was sick, he would have 100% called us to let us know and probably run things ourselves. And by the end of his little speech, I felt like a total jerk for even thinking about a day off, and was glad that I'd taken him up on the whole checking in on our boss thing. So, a few minutes later, we're turning off onto the road that our boss lives on, and although the houses aren't exactly huge, they're all nicely spaced out with privacy fences, big green hedges, and all that kind of stuff. We get to the house that belongs to our boss, and the moment we pull into the driveway, both me and my coworker get this really bad feeling, because our boss's door is just wide open and his truck is nowhere to be seen. I remember we both sat there on our seats, not saying a word, just looking at that wide open door. It wasn't some big red flag or anything, but that level of worry definitely got ramped up just a little more. Just not nearly as much as when my coworker reaches over, opens up his glove box, and pulls out a gun. I'd grown up around guns, so seeing one didn't freak me out or anything. It was the implication in that moment that had me afraid. I think I knew why he pulled it out too, but at the same time, I asked him what the heck was going on. My coworker told me to wait in the car, which immediately had me thinking, why the hell did you ask me to come along then? But then it hit me. He needed me there, just in case anything happened to him. He left his keys in the ignition, told me to shift over to the driver's seat, and that if he didn't come out in 5 minutes, to drive off and get the cops. I think up until that point, I'd never known what it meant to be truly terrified. I mean, I'd been afraid of all kinds of things. Getting rejected by girls, getting picked up by the cops with some weed on me, or getting jumped on the way home from school. But I only think the word terror or terrified applies when there's a legitimate danger to human life. When my coworker got out of his car and walked towards our boss's house, there was a chance that he might never walk out again, and that was truly terrifying to me. It did occur to me that he could have been slightly overreacting, but by that point, he was already out of the car. And maybe that was wishful thinking on my part, my brain's way of doing a little psychological damage control. But either way, I watched him walk into the house, gun drawn, not knowing what the hell was about to happen. A few minutes later, my coworker comes walking out of the house, and he only makes it a few steps off the porch before he doubles over and starts puking. And that's when I knew at that moment that our boss was dead. Or at least that there had been some kind of dead body in there or something. Nobody just walks out of a house and throws up unless they've seen something truly messed up. And honestly, right then in that moment, I was really glad that he told me to sit in that car and not follow him into the house. The second he started to puke, I got out of the car and started asking what the hell was inside. And just like before, I think I already knew what he was going to say on some level. I just needed to hear it from him. He never said exactly what it was. He just told me our boss was dead, and that we needed to hang around and wait for the cops because he just called them on his home phone. I remember standing there behind his driver's side door, probably with some dumb, stupefied look on my face. I'd never been in a situation like that before, never even anything approaching something like that. It sort of didn't feel real either, like it was real for my coworker because he saw it. But for me, I don't know. It's like I wanted to see what was in that house just to confirm it wasn't some elaborate prank or something. But then, unless my coworker had just delivered an Oscar-winning acting performance, unless the entire morning had been some elaborate setup, what was happening was real, and I sure as hell didn't want to see what had made my coworker empty his guts out. I didn't know what else to say, so I asked how our boss died. And my coworker was still wiping his mouth on his t-shirt and spitting out the last of his puke when he told me in a very nasally voice, "Murder." I repeated back to him, "Murder?" Because I just could not believe what I was hearing at that moment. I thought maybe it had been some kind of accident, and unlike my coworker, I didn't immediately conclude that there was some kind of human threat involved. Hell, one of the first things that went through my head when my coworker said our boss was dead was that he had taken his own life. He could have blown his own head off with a shotgun, which sure as hell would have made me puke if it had been me walking in on the aftermath. But when my coworker said murder and nodded when I turned the word back on him in a question, that was the question of, how did he know it was murder? I only asked one more question to my coworker that morning before the cops showed up. I mean, that was the one that I just asked. How could he be so sure that it was murder? The answer that came back is one that I'll remember for the rest of my life. He's taped to a chair. Not long after that, the cops did show up, by which point my coworker had put his gun back in his glove compartment. And we both talked to the cops for a minute or two, then one of them went inside the house to look around. He came back out a minute or two later, not puking but definitely shaken. We talked to the cops a little more, gave them our contact info, then after that, we were told that we were free to leave. I remember wondering what was going to happen over the next few days, and when I asked my coworker what we should do now, he told me, file for unemployment. I asked him if we should get lawyers or something, if the cops might think that we did it or something, and he told me that he didn't think that it'd be necessary. He was right about both. The cops only got in touch with us once more, and the auto shop took years to find a buyer so it could reopen. But to me, that was just small stuff. I could find another job, and I did, pretty easily actually, but we both still wanted to know what had happened to our boss, or more accurately, why it had happened, which as it turned out was bizarrely easy for the cops. So remember, I said our boss's truck was missing when we showed up at his place. Well, it had been stolen by these two drug addicts who had the bright idea of doing a little home invasion on Valentine's Day Eve. They'd heard, very inaccurately, that our boss was loaded, and that he had a bunch of gold bars or something stashed away in his house. He didn't, and he tells them that, but they didn't believe him. So they taped him to his computer chair, took off his shoes and socks, and began torturing him to get him to fess up. Obviously, he didn't have anything stashed away, and apparently he even offered to take them to an ATM so they would at least stop burning his feet with lighters and lit cigarettes. But no. They want the non-existent gold bars or bonds or whatever the hell they were looking for, so they kept on working their way up his legs until they got to his junk. I heard someplace that they were still torturing the guy when his heart just gave up and gave out on them. But still, they didn't want to leave empty-handed. So these two animals then took the keys to his truck and drove around trying to sell the thing in Reading. They didn't even drive to the next town over to throw the cops off their scent. And so a few hours after we spoke to the cops, some patrol unit was pulling over my boss's truck and arresting the two pieces of human trash who were in it. The female half of the couple later told the cops that the only reason they went looking for this big score like that was so she and her man could buy each other Valentine's Day gifts. To me, that's the only truly bizarre aspect of this whole thing. Once the people who killed him were arrested, they told the cops everything, down to the dumbest little details like that. I've heard that's like a thing with these meth heads, that they're prone to spill their guts to cops and stuff when other drug users can actually keep quiet and actually dodge charges. I don't know how true it is, but it seemed to have applied in their case. But then I've also heard the cops will dangle detox drugs in front of meth and heroin addicts, telling them that their jailhouse withdrawals won't be so bad if they only give up a little info. The point is, all the details came out in the months that followed, and I remember seeing the news about the pair getting sentenced around the holidays of that same year. Both got life in prison. But if you ask me, they should have dug a hole under that goddamn prison and thrown those two animals in there with no food or water until they just shriveled up and died. Anything else, in the face of what they did to my friend and my boss, seems like a slap on the wrist.
Hey guys, thanks so much for all the support. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please feel free to do so. I don't care. Everyone is coming on the official trip, and whoever doesn't want to come is off the team, team leader Eric announced. We looked at him with annoyance because he always said this. He doesn't care about the opinions of the rest of the team. He simply decides on his own, takes permission from the higher-ups, and says that the team wants this, the team wants that, and simply just informs us that we have to do this. I wonder who wants to stay on this team, I whispered. which was overheard by the person sitting next to me, Carlos, and he tried to control his laughter. "Is there anything you would like to say, Carlos?" The team leader noticed him laughing and asked. "Yes, why don't we all have a pre-trip overnight party on our floor?" he suggested, while trying to steal his eyes away from me because I was glaring at him for giving him ideas. "What an amazing idea, Carlos. Okay, everyone, tomorrow you will all bring your PJs to the office because we will be drinking all night, and no excuse for anyone." As he announced this, I sneakily smacked Carlos when no one was looking. Everyone else nodded their heads in agreement because they had no other choice. After the shift ended, I grabbed Carlos's hand and pulled him into the smoking area. "Are you mad or what? You know how he is, and I have zero alcohol tolerance, right? Why the hell would you suggest such a thing?" I smacked his back 3 times while saying this angrily, but he continued smiling. "I just wanted to see your reaction, and how else would I be able to see your Angry Bird side?" He laughed and said, which made me even angrier, and I started punching and kicking him, but he continued laughing. I got annoyed and stomped out of there. I was frustrated that the only days we get to rest after working like a horse were supposed to be wasted on overnight parties or some stupid office trip. The next morning, I saw the message in the team group that was sent by Eric that everyone was supposed to bring their luggage along with the PJs for the trip because we would head directly from there. He was just getting more and more annoying, I thought, and threw myself on the bed again. After a while, I got up and started packing my things half-heartedly. When I was done, I called Carlos, and even though I was still angry with him, he was still my best friend, and I could always kill him later. "Hello, my Angry Bird." He said this to annoy me on purpose, but I wasn't going to show him my annoyance yet. "You're coming to pick me up, understood?" I said. "This doesn't sound like a request to me," he said in a playful tone. "Because this is an order, not a request. Now, be here within half an hour. I'll be waiting." I hung up after saying that. When I was ready, I exited my house and locked it. I checked the time, and 3 minutes remained for the time limit I gave Carlos. That was when I saw his car stopping in front of the front gate. I knew he would come, because no matter how annoying he was still a good friend to me. He came out and walked toward me. "You know the trip is only for 3 days, right?" he asked, looking at my suitcase. "Don't worry, the suitcase is half empty. I just didn't have any other ones, so I took this," I said while handing him my suitcase, and he acted as if it was too heavy for him. I smacked his head for that reaction, and he started laughing. He put the suitcase in the car, and we got in after that. We drove to the office and saw the team leader standing near the parking area. His expression changed as soon as he saw us together. He always does this. He makes it so obvious that he is interested in me to the point that it makes me uncomfortable. We headed inside the office, and after putting our suitcase and bags in a safe place, we started working. In the evening, the team leader came with the bottles of alcohol in his hands and placed them in the kitchen. After that, he called us, saying that we should start the party. I knew that he was going to try to force me to drink, so I made Carlo drink at my place because it was all his stupid idea anyway. We played multiple games and continued drinking as a result, getting extremely drunk. I couldn't spot Carlos for a while, and that was when the team leader came toward me with a glass in his hand and started forcing me to drink. "You are the only one who did not drink properly, so you have to drink from my hands." I refused him, but he kept insisting. He looked pretty drunk because he had started to grab my hands and I kept pulling them away from him. I tried to get away from him, but this time he grabbed my waist and pulled me closer. He forcefully put the glass in my mouth and made me drink. That was when Carlos came and pushed him away from me. "Are you okay?" That was the first thing he asked. He looked at my eyes, which were torn up, and it made him angry. He grabbed Eric by his collar and punched him in the face. Eric was so drunk that he passed out in that one punch. The next morning, everyone woke up completely hungover and blacked out from last night. I asked Carlos not to make this into an issue and let him be this time. That was when the team leader received a call from the director saying that the trip had been canceled because some essential data and files were stolen from the department. He was immediately called to the meeting, and since he was so hungover, he had no idea what was going on. The next day, the team leader came and gathered his things because he was fired from his position. As he was going, he glared at me and Carlos. I could not understand the entire situation, so I looked over at Carlos in confusion and saw him smiling, which made me doubtful about him. He turned his face to me and winked, which made me understand what he was doing all along. Finally, this buffoon did something good. I smiled back and went back to work.